Like our video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing content.
The 2026 World Cup was supposed to be the biggest celebration football has ever staged. 48 teams, 3 host nations, a tournament built to bring the world together. But now, with the group stage in its final week, 2 competing federations have publicly clashed with FIFA over a single match, and the governing body has just made its position clear. Picture this, a routine Group G fixture, scheduled months in advance, assigned almost at random when the draw finally placed 2 specific nations into the same city on the same date. Nothing unusual about that on paper, except the city in question had already designated that exact date for one of its biggest annual civic celebrations, months before anyone knew which 2 teams would actually be playing there. And the 2 teams that ended up drawn into that fixture both formally objected, repeatedly, right up until kickoff. So what's really happening here, and why did FIFA ultimately side against both federations? Let's break it down. Start with the background, because the sequence of events matters enormously to understanding how this situation actually unfolded. Long before the World Cup draw took place, Seattle's local organizing committee had already designated June 26th as a special date tied to the city's annual Pride celebrations, an event with a history stretching back more than 50 years in the city. At that point, nobody knew which 2 national teams would actually be assigned to play there. The official World Cup draw happened months later, and when it concluded, Group G's 3rd fixture placed Iran against Egypt at Lumen Field in Seattle on that exact date, while their group rivals Belgium and New Zealand were scheduled to play the same day in nearby Vancouver instead. Almost immediately after the draw, both the Egyptian Football Association and the Football Federation of the Islamic Republic of Iran objected. Egypt's federation sent a formal letter to FIFA's Secretary General, stating it categorically rejects any initiatives related to supporting homosexuality during the fixture, and describing such activities as contradicting the cultural, religious, and social values of the region. Iran's federation president, speaking on state television, called the scheduling unreasonable conduct that supports a specific group and said the matter would be raised directly with FIFA's competitions committee. The framing of the dispute differed slightly between the 2 federations, even as their ultimate objection aligned. Both nations agree on the underlying legal backdrop driving their concerns. In Iran, consensual same-sex activity can be punished by flogging, imprisonment, or in some cases, execution. In Egypt, there's no single law explicitly criminalizing homosexuality, but morality statutes have been used for years to prosecute LGBTQ+ individuals, and rights groups have documented arrests linked to public displays of rainbow imagery in the past. This matters because it placed FIFA in an unusually difficult position almost immediately. The Pride programming itself wasn't something FIFA had created or organized. It belonged entirely to Seattle's host committee, planned independently of the World Cup and rooted in decades of local tradition, with the city's first Pride event dating back to 1974. But the match itself and which 2 nations would play it was entirely a FIFA decision, the direct result of an official draw conducted in Washington, D.C. 2 organizations, the host city and the world's governing football body, suddenly found their separate decisions colliding in a single high-profile fixture neither had designed to be controversial. Here's where things get interesting, because FIFA's actual response reveals a fairly careful, almost dual-track approach to handling the dispute. FIFA's official position was that the so-called Pride Match label was never part of its own operational programming. It belongs to the host city, not to FIFA's tournament structure, and FIFA repeatedly clarified that distinction whenever asked. At the same time, FIFA made clear it would not intervene to stop the celebrations from happening, and crucially, would not prevent fans from bringing rainbow flags or wearing rainbow-themed clothing into the stadium itself. A FIFA spokesperson stated directly that the World Cup is an inclusive event, welcoming people from all backgrounds, and that fans of all sexual orientations and gender identities are welcome at matches and events. adding that general statements of human rights, including flags representing sexual orientation and gender identity, are permitted under the tournament's own stadium regulations. That ruling effectively settled the most concrete part of the dispute. Iran's federation had specifically requested that only officially recognized national flags be permitted inside the venue, a request aimed squarely at preventing rainbow flags from appearing during the match. FIFA declined. Seattle's organizers, for their part, never wavered from their original plan, with city officials stating publicly that Pride isn't simply a day or a weekend in Seattle, but closer to an entire month of civic identity, one they had no intention of altering, regardless of which teams ended up playing there. One local organizer involved in the city's World Cup legacy programming told reporters they fully anticipate a lot of rainbow flags inside the stadium itself, alongside plenty of supporters wearing rainbow-themed shirts and accessories throughout the surrounding match day festivities. Local political figures in Washington state also weighed in publicly, with one openly gay state legislator describing the pairing as highly appropriate, arguing it offered a chance to project positive, visible images of the LGBTQ+ community specifically to supporters arriving from nations where that visibility doesn't typically exist. He drew a clear distinction between importing a pride celebration into a country where it might create genuine danger for local residents, something he agreed would likely be disastrous, versus hosting it within Seattle's own established civic identity, where he expressed confidence it wouldn't create a significant problem for visiting fans. But that's only part of the story, because the historical echo here runs deeper than a single scheduling dispute, and it connects directly to one of the most talked about controversies from the previous World Cup. This entire situation has drawn immediate, repeated comparisons to the 2022 tournament in Qatar, where FIFA found itself navigating a remarkably similar tension, just with the positions reversed. In Qatar, several European federations wanted their captains to wear a One Love armband, incorporating rainbow coloring as a broader symbol against discrimination. FIFA, working alongside host nations' sensitivities, ultimately blocked the gesture, reportedly threatening sporting sanctions against any captain who wore it. Germany's players responded during a team photo by covering their mouths with their hands, a visible protest against what they viewed as enforced silence. This matters because it shows FIFA approaching nearly identical territory from the opposite direction 4 years apart. In Qatar, the governing body sided with the host nation's cultural and legal norms over the wishes of visiting federations who wanted to make a symbolic gesture. In Seattle, FIFA has sided with the host city's civic programming over the objections of visiting federations who wanted that same symbolism removed entirely. The bigger issue here isn't really about pride specifically. It's about how a genuinely global tournament spread across cities and cultures with dramatically different social norms decides whose values take precedence when they come into direct conflict over the exact same match. There's an added layer of complexity specific to this tournament's three-nation hosting structure that didn't exist in Qatar. A single host country could, in theory, maintain one consistent cultural standard across every venue it controlled. A tournament split across the United States, Mexico, and Canada inherently invites exactly this kind of situation, where one host city's own civic traditions and values might differ significantly from another's, all while every team involved is simply trying to navigate a schedule decided months in advance by a random draw. Whether FIFA develops clearer guidance for handling these collisions before future expanded tournaments or continues responding to each dispute individually as it arises remains an open question. This situation has only made more relevant.
It's worth noting that FIFA's handling of this dispute hasn't satisfied critics on either side of the underlying debate. Some have argued FIFA's insistence that the Pride match isn't officially part of its own programming is a convenient distinction that lets the organization avoid taking a clearer stance either way, benefiting from the inclusive optics without formally endorsing anything itself. Others have pointed out that regardless of how FIFA labels its own involvement, the practical outcome, rainbow flags permitted, host city plans unchanged, represents a meaningful and consistent application of the same non-discrimination principles FIFA claims to hold across all its tournaments. Let's make this human for a moment, because behind the institutional statements are real fans and players navigating something genuinely complicated. For supporters traveling to Seattle specifically to watch their national teams compete, the atmosphere surrounding this particular fixture is unlike anything else in the tournament's group stage. Thousands of fans from two nations with deeply conservative cultural and legal positions on these issues will be arriving in a city actively celebrating an identity many of their own home cultures formally criminalize. Seattle officials have publicly acknowledged preparing for the possibility of protests, setting aside designated demonstration zones near the stadium, and confirming local law enforcement is ready to manage the situation if tensions spill beyond ordinary disagreement. The city's mayor specifically referenced recent matches in Southern California, which had already seen demonstrations connected to broader political tensions surrounding Iran's participation in the tournament, as part of the reasoning behind preparing protest zones well in advance of this particular fixture. A member of Seattle's own LGBTQ+ commission framed the symbolism of the moment directly, describing the visible presence of rainbow flags as a message specifically aimed at the two visiting nations, signaling that the host city remains free and welcoming to every race, sexual orientation, and gender identity, regardless of who happens to be playing on a given night. That kind of framing, explicit and unapologetic, stands in sharp contrast to how some host cities in past tournaments have handled similar friction, often opting for quieter compromises rather than such a clearly stated civic position. For the players themselves, caught entirely outside their control in a dispute generated by federation officials and city planners rather than anything happening on the pitch, the situation adds an unusual layer of attention to what should, ideally, be a straightforward group stage match with real qualification stakes attached. Both teams still need points heading into this fixture, and the football itself, whoever advances from Group G and under what circumstances, risks being overshadowed by a controversy neither squad asked to be part of. Players from both nations have largely avoided commenting publicly on the dispute themselves, leaving federation officials to carry the public-facing side of the disagreement entirely. So, where does this leave things as the match approaches? The most likely outcome, based on everything confirmed so far, is that Friday's fixture goes ahead exactly as scheduled, with Seattle's Pride programming continuing unchanged around the stadium, rainbow flags visible inside the venue itself, and both federations left to express their objections through official statements rather than through any change in policy. FIFA has given no indication of reconsidering its position this close to kickoff, and Seattle's organizers have remained consistently firm throughout the entire build-up to this match, never once suggesting they might scale back or relocate their planned celebrations regardless of which two nations ended up assigned to the fixture. The more uncertain question is what happens inside the stadium itself once the match actually begins, and whether the genuine tension surrounding the fixture translates into anything visible during play, in the stands, or in the broader media coverage that follows. Given how closely this situation echoes the Qatar dispute from the previous tournament, it's likely to remain a talking point well beyond this single match day, particularly if either federation chooses to escalate their objections further through FIFA's formal committee structures after the final whistle. It's also worth watching whether other host cities across this expanded three-nation tournament encounter similar friction of their own as the knockout rounds approach. Given how many different cultural and political contexts, this World Cup now spans simultaneously across 16 different venues. So here's where things stand. 2 federations objected, a host city held its ground, and FIFA, navigating the same fundamental tension it faced in the opposite direction 4 years ago, has chosen inclusion over restriction this time around, permitting the very symbolism it once limited at the request of a different host nation entirely.